what I started to see is that there's this whole feeling of like man's law coming into everything. I'm talking about like the laws of Moses, all the way into all the Levitical laws, and then again, same thing was happening like in the time of Christ was, these laws of man that I think are not necessarily the laws of God, and
Yeah.
and instead using the laws of man to push the image of God and say, this is the God you have to serve, this is the God you have to follow, right? Because how best to control a people than to control the God they worship or control God itself, right? If I say that
Yeah.
this is the only way, this is it, I'm moving into this monotheistic mentality. I'm moving into this place where it's like, oh no, you have to do this and follow these rules, or that's it, or you're out of the group.
Yeah.
And I do find that a little bit hard to believe, because if that was the case, then why was Jesus so like hostile at moments when he's turning over tables in the temples and he's speaking directly against them? And the one part that really really stood out to me the most, though, when I was reading these books, is that Jesus will say, go to the temple and do such a thing, and then they would reply to him, yeah, but Moses said. So there's a direct contradiction there where it's
Mm-hmm.
like Jesus is telling them to do something without following the laws of Moses. And then
Uh-huh.
Jesus' response to them was, okay, well then do what Moses told you to do.
But
you
and
know?
there's also a lot of times this makes so much sense to me. Like imagine you were I'm not going to say you're Jesus. Like imagine you're just someone who wants to teach what Jesus was teaching, right? You come down and you're talking to these people, and anytime it's your people, they're obviously going to reference your book, and they're like, okay, what would Moses do? And he's just trying to say, well, but oftentimes what he does is he says, let's say he might say, didn't Amos or Isaiah, somebody else that maybe he likes from their mythology, like he referenced them, like didn't they did this or didn't they say this, right? Because it looks like obviously the Old Testament is a large selection of books, and he picks out the moments and the ones that he likes to reference to say, yeah, that happened, but also this happened, right? And he that's why he's able to sway some Jews into his corner and not the rest. But it just makes perfect sense for me that he keeps referencing, and he's very careful to sometimes he loses it, but most of the time he's very careful to make sure that he's not offending the masses, right? But he certainly was offending the actual empires, right? Like the Roman Empire and such. And his power was so much that the one, they killed him, and two, even afterwards he was causing he was being a pain in the butt, because even after his death the masses were rising and rising and rising, and until Roman Empire just figured out a way to just put a stop to it by seizing the control, by creating the church and the pope and everything else. And I think that's really important, because I used to always say, well, if Christianity is great, which we agree it's a good moral compass, Catholic Church, in my opinion, this is my opinion, Catholicism is killing Christianity and has been killing Christianity, because it took what was the teaching that was supposed to be felt and experienced at the core, turned it into a hypocritical show where you're fine if you just go and pay money and pray and pretend to say the words, even if you completely have no connection to what is it you're even saying. People today, you can see it even in Christianity. Not all. There's a lot of great Christians that probably should not call themselves Catholic. There are Christians like Matt Walsh actually is a Catholic Christian, and when he talks about his Christianity, I'm like, why are you even calling yourself Catholic? You sound like the very original Christians, like which are the Armenians, the Coptics, and the Ethiopians, and very fringe minority of Syriacs. So the rest switched to more Orthodox or Catholic, which just became became this church system, and it's just no longer, it's just stirred away from Jesus' teaching and became more of a power tool. And we see
Hmm.
it today. There's no honor, there's no dignity, there's so much cowardice, and none of the things that Jesus was teaching. I just wish it wasn't exploited by the church.
Right. Well, so and that's where, because if we're talking about, because this is what I was saying about the differences in the writings of the Old Testament, because what I truly believe is that at some point these writings and the God, the original God that was first written about, was kind of sabotaged and confiscated. It went from this book of kind of trying to find understandings, and I mean, there's really deep, deep, deep mystical understandings to a lot of the Old Testament scriptures. I mean, this huge, it's filled with allegories, and so um, I think that's what's kind of special about it. But then there's this whole really order and structure to it that comes much later on. And that's where I think it was maybe sabotaged a bit, and it was kind of confiscated at this this religion, and then it moved, a few hundred years later, and that's where Christ comes in, and he was kind of like, hey, uh, we kind of got off track here, folks. We were riding this boat, and then we switched to that boat. Um, but I think trying to bring us back to the original intent of it all. But if I believe this, that it was sabotaged, and it can be sabotaged, if I do believe this, then I also must consider that the New Testament scriptures were also sabotaged and compromised and taken over. Because I am going to put myself as the devil or Satan or evil, right? I'm going to put myself in that position. Well, there's no way I'm going to let this go just willy-nilly around and let people just have all the information. Like, get out of here. No, I'm not. I'm going to
Which
try to
is
obscure
part of
and
human
hide the
behavior,
meaning.
really.
Yeah, right, right,
Which
right, right,
has
right.
been part of human behavior for centuries. Powerful people seek control, and when they see a powerful tool, they exploit it and they take over because they cannot have that powerful tool to grant freedom to humanity. It's just something that I don't think it's an opinion of mine. I think it's just very observable throughout history.